Welcome to another episode of the Path Less Chosen Pod, the podcast showing you the careers they don't teach you about in school. I'm Jamie.
I'm Sol.
And our guest today is Lew Bedford, founder of a charity called RANGERLAB.
Yeah, I remember at uni, he was someone who seemed to have his finger in so many different pies. So we'll see how he managed to keep that going through uni, and also what actually drives him to want to make a charity his career, which is such like an admirable and cool thing.
His big headline act was this RANGERLAB, so I'm looking forward to hearing about the details of how it began and where he sees it going.
Lovely. Let's get on.
Well then, welcome Lew. Great to have you on. So your Path Less Chosen is, of course, RANGERLAB. So just to begin with, give us a little overview as to what exactly that charity is and what your role is within it.
Yeah, sure. So RANGERLAB's a conservation charity, equipping and empowering wildlife rangers who work on conservation projects, be it in sort of sub-Saharan Africa or up in the sort of altitude regions of the Himalayas, protecting really vital ecosystems, landscapes, and spaces really that are massively underfunded, of course vital to biodiversity and security for those regions. And the key thing that we do is we provide really basic support. So if you think of the whole range of support that conservation needs, all the way from helicopters and huge multi-million-pound investment, we do the really simple things. So the boots, the socks, the uniforms, the feminine hygiene products, and everything that kind of can get swept over in the midst of all of the noise of the big sexy things in conservation. So just recently we've provided grants to improve the gym facility in a really remote national park in Zimbabwe called Chizarira. We've also provided feminine hygiene products for that same project to make sure that the female rangers have the right kit and feminine hygiene products to do their job with some dignity and comfort. All sorts of different things around the world that have made material benefits for people. And ultimately, it's putting a human touch on conservation, one that I'd argue has been overlooked. And to be honest, when we look at the stats that come out from the major conservation institutions, like half of these rangers around the world who are protecting nature with their lives, a lot of them, half of them don't have the kit or equipment to do their job. So we've got a huge issue at the moment, and there's only going to be increased need for wildlife rangers. So yeah, we're doing our best to keep up with the demand and to keep up with the need that there is to continue supporting them. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've set it up in 2019 as a real pocket project, like just something I thought was a good idea. And yeah, I've been really lucky that we've kept doing it, stay consistent, and to be where we are today, which is, I think, making somewhat of a degree of change. Right from the start, it's been me really, and that's because the story that I heard about this issue was something that I felt personally that I could make a difference in. So, as you guys will know, like I played a lot of cricket in my time. I played with some really amazing cricketers, and I've been so lucky to play that sport and meet so many great people. And I realised that community is one that are always supportive of sort of philanthropic activity as well. So when I was ringing up my cricket mates for cricket socks to give to wildlife rangers right from the start, that was something that really made this like a simple connection to my friends about what I was trying to achieve. So it was me in the bedroom putting your socks into a box, putting it in a DHL shipment and getting it out to Zambia. And that was just in the interim between school and university. So this was something I didn't probably imagine I'd still be doing with as much vigor and effort as now. But that's the sort of common theme, is that when you run your own organization where it's pretty much just you and some supporting team members, you kind of dictate the pace by which things grow, slow, everything else in between. So it's had to be late nights, it's had to be working on hangovers, it's all of those different things where you're at university and there's so many other distractions, but somehow like it kept just ticking over, and we feel really lucky that we've always had a degree of momentum to make it worthwhile to keep doing. So those impact reports, those photos, those pieces of support from people that we really care about is kept ticking over. And to get to where we have done today, if we'd have just dried that momentum up, we would have never really got to now.
You say it's always been you from the start. Well, let's go back to like before the start. What gave you the inspiration to even start the charity?
Ever since I was probably 12, 13, I've always been interested in conservation. So the natural space and the natural world is clearly a huge topic today, but maybe 10 years or so ago, it wasn't as prominent as it is now. So I've always wanted to do little things. I ran the London Marathon when I was 18 for a conservation charity. My family, some of them are from Zimbabwe, so I have that connection back to Africa. But truthfully, yeah, like the story that came up was around a wildlife ranger who was working with his boots on, but he didn't have any socks to wear with those boots. So to me, that was a real big symbol. Like the symbol for that was that if they don't have socks in their boots, this level of detail isn't being catered to sufficiently. And I knew I could fix that. And that for me is the genesis of what happened after. Was there's a problem and you can solve it and it's really tangible. And there's a lot of problems in the world and there's a lot of different solutions, but it's a really simple one that we created. So I don't take any credit for the ingenuity or innovation. It's just a really simple fix. And actually, when we did a bit more digging and we spoke to the same sorts of people who didn't have the socks, turned out they didn't have the right uniforms. It turned out their boots weren't fit for purpose. They didn't have sleeping shelters. They didn't have tents, all of these different things. So little by little, I guess that became a formal organization, but it definitely started as just a good deed. Like, I'm going to try and fix that little thing, realized it was getting a lot bigger and there's a big scale of a kind of issue going on. And then, yeah, bit by bit, felt it was appropriate to continue making support, both in finance, but also in equipment to those projects. And yeah, little by little, we got to here.
I think it sounds like you obviously went down quite a niche route in the whole nature conservation and ranger project, because I've seen lots of charities and organizations campaigns around with anti-poaching and things like that. But what I think is quite impressive about RANGERLAB is you seem to have gone quite deep and like under the surface rather than just surface level. Yeah, we're going to provide a ton of money to people trying to protect nature. You were like, no, this is the problem and we can present a solution. Do you think that was something that was really important early on to develop a charity that was going to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, charities are a funny one. There's so many organizations out there trying to fix the same problems. And we didn't necessarily feel that there was one trying to fix this sufficiently. So, you know, in a lot of different social needs, there are 100 different charities supporting rhinos. There's probably maybe 1,000 doing cancer work. And these are all fantastic organizations. But I just found like when I was trying to make that support formal, I didn't see an organization that I could put funds into in the UK that was the appropriate one to do that. And to do it with a level of detail and care and humanity that I thought was required. It's very easy just to give money to a charity and then let them go and be accountable for that money and go and do it in their way with their strategy. But I just felt that there was a different strategy that needed implementing, which was one with a bit more of a human touch to it, a bit more respect as well in it. And I feel like that was a really key part of what we were trying to achieve, yeah.
How did you turn all of these great ideas into actually steps forward?
I mean, you have to start with your left foot forward, right? And unfortunately, there's no tool guide or toolkit to go and achieve change in this space. So, like, people would have laughed at me at the start, and I'm sure they did, and I would have laughed at myself for doing it at the start. But that was like, okay, set up an Instagram, start making a message about what you're trying to achieve. Set up a logo, set up a website. And we did that all for, out of my back pocket. It was like a $5 to set up a logo and a website, that kind of thing. And the truth is, if I look back now at some of the materials we were using to communicate the issues and to try and make people aware of it, to inspire them to support us, they were shocking. Like, they were really bad and amateur. And that's the whole beauty of it, is that we didn't go and pay a corporate consultancy 50 grand to do a logo for us. We didn't go and pay an agency to do our comms. Like, it was just me on my iPhone. You just press the Instagram button, swap account, put something up, and that was the message that I was trying to get across. And the truth is that the derivative benefit of what we've achieved is through consistency. So like, we would have always just stayed in that little message with that little kind of idea, because we've kept putting those feet forward and we have not once stopped. Just keep plodding along, you become better at things. Like, I by no means am the best person to do Instagram, to do film, to direct a film, to direct an international brand partnership. I've ended up doing that by chance, really, because unfortunately, A, there's no one else to do it, and B, we're becoming professional in each day that we move on, because we're learning what not to do. We're able to watch other people and see what's good, what's hot, that kind of stuff. And then bit by bit, we, improve. But many people remember the first days of what was called the Sockstar project, which was the initial pocket project. And that was really amateur. But I think that there's some beauty in the amateurness of what we were doing, because that to me was the signal that this was coming from the heart and it wasn't just coming from, I'm going to try and do something to make me look good. I just wanted to solve that problem.
I love that. I think that's a pretty common theme between a lot of people we speak about is actually we get people who are the finished product on here, and actually at the start, even like, you know, Jamie will say my TikToks, like, they're awful, and your like logos, right? And you compoundly get better and better. So that's an interesting message that we've seen through a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, and it's that iceberg kind of narrative, is that most people give up when their stuff's not popping, right? Like, when I put stuff up that I thought, this is so great, this is exactly what we're trying to get, no one even looks at it. And that's cool. You've just got to take that in a stride. And I feel like, you know, so with that stuff, the compound benefits of just sticking with it, particularly on somewhere like Instagram, like, it does build. For us, actually, it's a lot about the fundraising aspect. You think that by sending out this pitch deck that you've put hours of your time into, that's perfect, it might not be you. It might be other organizations just aren't ready for that kind of that deck, or whatever it is. Like, you've just got to stick like really boring consistency. And I notice a lot of founders, both in the profit and not-for-profit space, the founders or co-founders in that are very, very simple in terms of there's just one message that they're trying to get across. They stick to that. They don't pivot too much. They don't get, you know, giddy about the new idea that's coming on the block. If you trust that process, it is cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, is because there's a process to follow. I don't know many people in the space that have woken up next morning, they've got massive socials, they've got a huge following, they've got a huge donor support list. And truthfully, you can't rush this stuff in the charity sector. Like, I can't just go about speeding my way through relationships, speeding my way through asking people at the right time. There's like a really careful and delicate process to follow, so that you don't spin people out and they suddenly think you're a chancer. So like, that's been, I think, the biggest thing for me, is that the consistency is my testament to my character. It's like, I have to prove to people that I really care about this for the next 5 years onwards. And by doing that, they'll trust me. But, you know, why should anyone trust me off the street, you know, me or the next person? So that consistency has had to build kind of my narrative as a person, because a lot of people support RangerLab because they have an affinity with me as an individual, and they sort of believe in my vision, really.
Because I guess it's a key theme that once you've taken those first steps, you kind of hold yourself accountable to it. So, you know, once you had the name, the brand, the Instagram and everything out there, people could see that you were doing something. So then you're holding yourself accountable to it as well. Did you think that was the hardest part of it, or did the hardest bit then come once you then went to university, having to keep that consistency you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jamie. And I think the difficult thing that I found was that it wasn't actually going to be my career. Like, I didn't know that this would turn into my sort of full-time commitment at some point. I just felt it was always going to be in my pocket, something I cared about. But I care about a lot of things. I care about the cricket. I care about, you know, other things that are going on in the world that aren't just wildlife ranges. So I didn't think it would turn into my career at all. And I think that gave me some kind of longevity to it, because I wasn't just trying to pour all of my time and effort into it. I could just pick and choose. And I wasn't setting targets that I couldn't fulfill. So I don't think we set a financial target once for the last, you know, 3 of the first 3 years. We just see how we go. And that took the pressure off me, feeling like, if I don't reach out to so many X, Y, and Zs, then, you know, you're not going to get to that target. And I think organic growth trumps inorganic growth every time when it relates to these sorts of things. Like, I fully expect that in 20 years' time, this will still be running, which will have given it a 25-year life cycle. We'll compound all the impacts of that. But the truth is, like, it's not even worth looking too much at where we are now. I'm just happy to be here. We're happy to have achieved quite a lot of nice things, but I don't for a minute think that we're done. And that longevity, like, we're not stopping now, we've got a long way to go, is almost a curse and a blessing, because it means that you're never stopping and you're always on it. But at the same time, for me, like, there's so much still to do to feel like, you know what, we've done our thing, so that when it's all said and done, we've made a positive stamp on this planet. I've had a couple of days where you just sort of sit around and go, you know what, like, we're actually doing some good things and they matter to people. But that's rare. Like, it's always what's next. So it's that balance, right?
It sounds like now you've got this really strong conviction in what the charity's doing and the plan for the future. But when you were at university and you went there to study social sciences and you were doing everything around university, how personally did you decide how to prioritize?
It's a funny one, because I've always had a decent capability to pivot between like issues and things that's going on in my life. So like when I'm at the cricket centre, I'm really focused on my cricket. When I'm in a lecture hall, I'm really focused with my lecture, right? And when I'm doing RangerLab stuff, I'm really focused on that. And I'm pretty capable at flicking between the 3 or 4 or 5 different things going on at the time. And I think that's been a real benefit of for me, is that I can flick between those things. Now, obviously, there'll be times when the pressure spikes, right, for certain things to be done. So, you know, the week before the first class cricket games, like, you're getting ready for that. The week before your dissertation's due, you're dialing into that. But as a general rule, like, balance is super important. And I found that balancing and just juggling, like, you're constantly juggling, and you get better at juggling. You might have to wake up early, you might have to go to bed late, but you're constantly juggling things. And I think that's a healthy place to be, because I don't know many people in life that just have one thing. Like, you know, even when you get to a point where you've got kids, or, you know, you've got a significant partner, like, you're constantly juggling your own time, whether that's your passion, your mission, your job, your sport, your health, everything. And I don't think you can be successful without, you know, having lots of different balls that you're juggling at the same time.
I think you personally were someone who at university you could notice you had these different hats, and I found it so impressive that you could put these on at different times and take on different roles. Do you think that was a learned skill then, or something that just came naturally to you?
I always think about that, Jamie, because I think sometimes I've noticed that the hats would cross over, right? And you needed to be really careful that when you were going into that environment, you weren't, you know, the larrikin coming to have a laugh, you were like really serious. So yeah. I don't think it was learned. I think I've always been slightly like able to just pivot and have smile and then laugh and then turn around and go, right, I'm serious now. And that wasn't something, I don't think I've had any role models where I've noticed that that was a really simple thing to do. My parents are also like multitaskers. I've always seen at home that they've got, you know, their sport, they've got their work, they've got other things going on in life. And I think maybe I've learned from them. But yeah, like, you're right. I have noticed that there's been an ability to do different things at the same time and not let the persona that comes and does the, you know, the socials mix as well with the person that's going to focus on their health and fitness and sport. Sometimes, you know, I feel like I'll come off the back of a really difficult piece of work or something, and then I'm totally refreshed because I've gone and flipped, you know, what I'm focusing on into sport or something. So I think in high pressure, I'm not saying I'm super high pressure right now, but in a high pressure environment, like, the ability to just switch off from that thing that's causing you, you know, anxiety or whatever you're thinking about, your dissertation, your whatever it is, to be able to flick to a new world where that's your big focus has been a really valuable skill, and I couldn't put a price on that.
How does that persona even up level when you're speaking to potential sponsors and people for fundraising?
Yeah, it's there's a few different things where I've realized, wow, like, you are taking some responsibility on. I remember flying to Munich last year on my own to go and pitch the organization to a number of different brands, like major blue chip outdoor wear brands. And I just remember, like, that being a seminal moment in my sort of, this is like, you're growing up now because you're really trying to give this a good go. That for me was an experience that that brought a bit of, you know, I was a bit nervous actually to get on that plane and go and just sit on my own. I remember I literally arrived on my own, didn't know anyone in this huge conference center where all of these brands were, and just would go up to people and say, hey, look, I just want to share with you, this is my little idea, and like, what do you think? And I think that persona, there's some similarities, and I think being a good people person is massively important. And there'll be people watching this and going, he's not a good people person, and that's cool. But I think for me personally, like, I really try my best to see the good in people. And I think that's a really valuable skill. But, you know, with work, I'm trying to see the best in finding ways to work with people. And not everybody likes you in the world, and that's fine. But finding a way to find common ground, to, you know, to have success with other people and to share that is something that I feel like is the common theme between all of it. But also the consistency part's really important. So saying one thing to one person and then flipping on your head and saying another to another. Everyone's in a really small world. They'll always work out, you know, whether you're a solid like operator or whether you're a little bit flaky or you're here, there and everywhere. I feel like that's the same outside of work as well, like with other people in your friendship groups, but also with your own health and well-being. Like consistency, you know, making sure that you're trying to be the same consistent person, looking to grow all the time is really important.
Unreal. You're almost doing 6 or 7 business functions in one, having set your own thing up. How do I accumulate these skills? How do you even go about speaking to marketing directors about marketing?
Yeah, so it's just trial by error. Like, the more we mess it up, the more times I send a deck where the numbers are wrong in the slides, the more I learn and the more that will get me into the place I want to get to with the quality. Again, I think it comes down to not being overstretched. I think if you're overstretched, you feel like there's so many different things that you have to do at pace. So if you try and distill that and do fewer things at better quality, naturally, like, you'll just be more consistent with your work. But when it relates to building skills, particularly things like partnership development or content, I, as I mentioned before, like, I was tasked with effectively writing the script for this brand partnership film between Stance and us, and working with two award-winning cinematographers and photographers. And I didn't know what I was talking about, but that didn't really matter. It's because I didn't try and pretend I did. And that's, I think, another thing, is that when I was working with them on that project, all I was making it very clear is, here's what I think is really important to what we're trying to achieve. You're the experts as well. It's the worst feeling in the world for me when, there's been a promise that's been made that you can't deliver on. I feel like under promising and over delivering in this space, particularly when you're trading on your reputation, is hugely valuable. But yeah, the truth is, is that I've made a lot of mistakes, and I don't apologize for those, because I'm trying to just do my best and learn. You'll always get the kind of person that will come back and say, not sure, this isn't great, or this is really poor quality. But, I won't accept that it's not for want of trying. Like, I've tried really hard to make things work on a tiny budget, always on a shoestring. So I feel like if they feel that the energy is in the right space with what you're trying to achieve, for example, pitching, then they're not going to be looking to catch you out. It's not like I'm looking for something out of this myself. The truth is, I'm trying to help some other people. And I think that's a huge distinction when it comes to how people interpret the quality of your work as well.
Yeah, so I think you presented two really important messages there. I think firstly, the filtering down what you're taking on to ensure that the quality delivers good, but then you also mentioned the importance of, you failed a few times, and as long as you learn from it, it's not going to be a bad thing. So how do you balance the two? How do you decide what to say yes or no to, and how do you filter what you're prioritizing?
I think there's like this founder's instinct, and you just have this instinct of what is important. In another world, you'll be told what's important, whereas in this space, like, you're really deciding exactly what's important and when it's important. So there's two ways that I find that's really useful to make sure that I'm aligned with what really needs doing. The first is, speaking with my support network and saying, on a particular piece of work, like, what do you think is really vital that we get done on this, and what do we need to do before we can go forwards? And then on the second thing is kind of just asking it back to the person or the people that you're working with, or whatever it is, and saying, okay, well, here's what we're going to try and do. There's always a reason to add more slides in a deck, for example. And actually, most of the things that you can do can be achieved in half of the time, because you just need to cut down the noise on a lot of these things like deliverables. I think the big thing for me is less is more. Really simple, like, don't try and overcomplicate it, over-engineer it. Keep it really simple, and that often brings quite a lot of value. I think on the failure part as well, the more you put out there, the more that there is a risk that it couldn't be perfect. So by distilling it and making it a smaller product or pitch deck, or whatever it is, anything, actually you can really improve the quality of it, because there's a whole lot less kind of expected of you, and you can just increase the volume as time goes on, I guess. I
saw that you've done a bit of work in consulting as well. How did you navigate the consulting world and then decide corporate, decide charity? How has that ended up with you back in the charity now?
I mean, the big thing is that at the time that I was looking to do something was in the middle of a pandemic, and like, at that time there weren't heaps of jobs around. There wasn't a lot of philanthropy going on either. So I just decided to I did an internship, actually, just because I thought it would be useful not to just box myself in as just a charity worker. There's no issue with that, but I think that, again, as I've always said, like, being multifaceted is important. So I wanted to just have a dip at it and see what it was like. So I ended up doing 10 months in consulting at the end of university. So just to see, right? Just see, what can I learn? What can I get involved in? And the truth is that the people were fantastic, and I met some amazing people. And I've kept those relationships, warm, which is really important, I think, as well, in terms of goodwill. Is just because you change career path doesn't mean you just bin everyone off and say, well, that's me done there. There's some really good people there who are on their own journeys and pursuing their own goals. And that's really important to make clear. I think for me, the reason that I left is because this felt like the beck and call at the time that I did leave. That was in somewhere around May June 2022, so actually not that long ago. And at that point, for me, the most important thing was to make sure that I feel like I'd had a good go. So I didn't sort of just pack up because I was like, oh, I've got something else on. See you later. It wasn't like that. It was am I really sure that this is what I want to do? Do I feel like there's a commercial and sort of charitable income stream that will be able to keep us afloat to be able to do that? Was it a risk? Yeah, of course it was. And I look back and sort of in amazement that I took that jump, because that was brave, and I'm not sort of pumping up my own tires, but just to walk out of a door and say, this is what I'm going to do, and I know it's going to work. And some might argue it hasn't fully worked out, like we've still got a long way to go. But it was brave. But the truth is, I really believe in what we're doing, and that for me is the currency that I will make my decisions on. Is conviction. There's 100 people at the time I was saying I'm actually going to go in this direction. Most people are very, very happy to say, oh, good luck to you. That's great. And what awesome people. There's a few people that say, well, what if it doesn't work? What are you going to do then? And the truth is, for me, it was a moot point. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out. I'm so privileged. I really feel so lucky that I've got a roof over my head. I can do so many different things. I've got a network of people that I really trust and get on with. If this fails, that's fine. We'll go back to the drawing board and life goes on. And I'm not the first person to change my career. I'm not the first person to have another go at something. And I think there's a taboo that comes from the corporate, that by leaving that, you also sacrifice a lot of other things. And the truth is, it depends. I don't think I've sacrificed much at all. I don't think I'm any less happy. I think I'm, if anything, happier being where I am right now. And I'm just on a different wavelength, it personally with myself and things like that. And it sounds a bit hippie, but I feel like being my own boss now has been a real privilege. I've learned skills I don't think I could have possibly learned about my own ways of working, and getting up every single morning knowing that it's only on you. You haven't got a Microsoft Teams to chat with people about work. It's just you. And that has been my kind of mini MBA. I also think that we often compare things as better or worse and not just different. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm so jealous of what you do. It must be so great. And the truth is, I'm often jealous of what people do in the corporate space and some of the opportunities they get to go and do things and see the world and all of those things too. So it's not, I don't think it's a case of better or worse. And I think people too often make that distinction that by going and being your own boss, it's better, or equally, by being paid or getting a corporate role, it's better. It's not, it's just different. And it comes down to what you value. I couldn't put a price on some of the experiences I've had to learn about myself in the last 2 years or so. I don't feel like I would have learned them in corporate, and I don't feel like also I'm behind anyone because I'm at my own pace. I don't have this huge ambition to go and scuttle up the corporate ladder or go and buy investment properties right now. Like, I'm just in this zone where I'm trying to make this thing work, and I really care about that, and the rest is kind of just noise. So for whatever anyone else is yardsticking their kind of progress to, or their progression post university, my wavelength is my wavelength, and everyone else is theirs, and I respect them completely. They've got jobs, they've got families to look after, but for me right now, like, this is just where I'm at, and I'm quite proud of that, I guess.
It's not all glamour and stuff like that, and I guess you touched on a few of them there. I'm very interested in what are some of the kind of harsh realities you've experienced, especially seeing a few of your friends climbing up the corporate ladder, getting nice paychecks.
I remember a story, and I've never told this before, but it feels like a good time. I remember being in the Putney supermarket and getting my card declined maybe like a year ago, trying to buy some eggs or something. I can't even remember what it was. And I remember that being like oh my word, like, this is like rough. I wasn't getting paid at the time from the charity. And that for me was like a really important learning for me at that point, where I was like, okay, these are the sacrifices you make. I had to walk out of this shop and just go back home. And that was that. And though I know that's not, I'm not saying that I'm, poor me or anything, but that was a moment where everyone that watches you in your big kind of progression of what you're doing and says, oh, he's on the come up and everything, they don't see everything else, I don't think. And that was a moment that I reflect on often and going, okay, like, that was a low moment where you question, is it worth it? So that was one of them. I think also there's been times where you're just so relentlessly trying to do good things that sometimes wires get crossed and you end up winding someone up or getting the message wrong and saying, asking at the wrong time, whatever it is. And the truth is that really hurts because, like you're a bit like a puppy. You just want to get good energy from people back about the work you're doing because you're enthralled in it. And the truth is not everyone actually cares that much. And that's cool. And I don't care about certain charity activities either. That's just, we can't care about everything. So yeah, there's been some lows on the journey. The most sort of prominent one is the sacrifice in financials, I think, as well. But the highs for me have exceeded the lows. When I look back and I'm old and I say, was it worth it? I think I would say it was, because these last 2 years have taught me things that I don't think I could have put a price on. And they've built relationships with friends who haven't come from university, who haven't come from school, who have come from the charity sector. And there's some really good people there who I'm very grateful to have worked with.
Now that you're in a position that I guess things are more stable and hopefully you can afford your eggs now. But
yes.
So now, how does it look like in terms of the future, the next 5-10 years, if you want to put a time scale on it? Talk to us about where you see not only the charity, but also, I guess more importantly, for this podcast, where do you see yourself?
The truth is so we'll separate the two, because I think actually my relationship with the charity doesn't need to be inextricably intertwined. Actually, I think that there can be a separation, and there should be actually. So for the charity, we're really ambitious that if we keep the message and the narrative the same, we'll grow, and that's almost guaranteed. We've got the track record to prove that. We're growing year on year, and that's a positive sign as most of those things go. So more impact and will come from more fundraising. More fundraising will come from deeper relationships built on trust and goodwill from some really generous people. And that will take time. You cannot just walk into a bar and pick up, I mean, maybe you can, but I don't know. You can't just pick up major funders just in the bar. Like, these are things that take time, reputation, authenticity, the same message, the proof that you're sticking to what you said you'd do. And then for me, like, the truth is, I haven't really worked that out, and I'm really comfortable that I haven't worked that out, because I don't necessarily believe, I hear a lot that, you're not quite there yet. You've got your exams at school, and then you have to go to university and take some exams, and you're not quite there yet because you've got this thing to go and do, and these waves to go and sort of sail on, and to go up a corporate ladder, or to go and build a business and to have revenue that hits X, Y, and Z million. The truth is, like, I'm here, and when I go out in places like the Isle of Skye and just stand on a hillside and just look at a view, like, I feel in my own skin that I'm here, and I'm not in a rush to be anywhere else. I'm content, I'm happy, I'm healthy, and I'm really lucky to be those three things. In 10 years' time, who knows where I'll be? I hope I'm around, and I hope I'm still doing the same sorts of things that I'm doing now, which is putting other people first. But the truth is, that's not what drives me. Like, what drives me is the fact that I'm here today, and I feel like I'm doing something of use to the world, and that's what matters. So we shall see, and I'm sure I'll be in a totally different headspace and on a different wavelength in 10 years, because life changes. What's a priority to me today and what's my responsibility today will be really different, I'm sure, in 10 years.
Everything you've just said there aligns with everything else that you've been speaking about so far. So then, leading on to the final question then. So the same one we ask everyone, but just to remind you. So going back to the start, we just want to know one thing you do the same, one thing you do differently, and one thing you tell yourself to motivate yourself.
So I actually had to write these down because I thought they're actually quite tough questions. So I think the first thing that I'd do the same is just keep believing that we're doing the right thing. And I think we have done. And I think we wouldn't be here if we didn't have that sort of relentless belief in that what we're trying to achieve is an important thing to achieve. It's not perfect. And actually, for me now, looking back, we've made a lot of mistakes, but the belief hasn't changed, is that we can and we should do what we're doing to make a difference to the outcome that we're trying to achieve. I think the thing I do differently, and it relates to scaling an organization and how it would have taken us a lot less time to get here now. And hindsight's great for this, but like, the success we've derived has come from a very small amount of activities, very small amount of dialogues, a very small amount of things that have created the change that we've created. So if you were to look on a statistical basis, of the 25,000 emails that I've ever had that have been sent out, received, communicated, or something like that, probably 75 of those emails are of significant, critical business importance to the organization. Everything else is noise. And that, for me, tells me that distilling into the really vital things that do shift the dial for what you're trying to achieve, whether that's in a corporate space, whether that's in your lifestyle, your health, whatever it is. There's like a really fractional amount of things that actually truly matter. And when you can kind of work out that firing a million blanks has to sometimes be done to hit that one or two things on the head and do it perfectly. Some people will get there quicker. Some people will get there slower. You'll all have to be able to like just fire blanks at will and just to find what really works. And then, the last thing to motivate myself is just to be here, like be present, stop looking at tomorrow, stop looking at yesterday. Like I messed up yesterday and I'll mess up tomorrow. But right now I'm content, and I feel like that's the most important thing, is to be in my own skin now, because there'll be criticism coming up. There's been criticism in the past. There's been an amazing piece of success in the past. There's been an amazing piece of success, I'm sure, that will come in the future. But that's all noise. That's like then, there, but here today with you guys. Like I just feel that that's the most important thing, to stay in your skin and just keep it, day by day, cracking on, because you can't control yesterday or tomorrow. It's done.
What an answer, mate. It's great to hear you not only speak about like how you came to it, but the genuine value and interest you have in what you're doing. So thanks very much for sharing with us. And I'm sure a lot of people will be hearing about the RANGERLAB name and hopefully interacting with it.
Honestly, guys, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Another interesting one, always tests me. I don't know whether I'm more nervous about advertising the social medias at the end or having to do these free key takeaways, but I'll give it a go. Do you want to start with one, or are you happy for me to go?
You go for your first one. To be fair, I've actually written a fair few as well, so we're going to have to really chop here.
Yeah, I've circled 4, so let me decide which one I'm going for first. I'm going to say this one because I think you'll go for the other one anyway. The best line I think he came out with was he said about having conviction as your currency, and I think that's a really important thing when you're going down a path less chosen. If you don't have that conviction, the chances are you'll quickly turn around and you'll happily go to something that's a lot more comfortable, that you're a bit more confident on.
Tom, I couldn't agree more. I think that was the biggest theme that you spoke about. I wrote it down like slightly differently about just working out what your value is and then following it. But I think it's the same thing, right? The biggest thing I took away, apart from that one you mentioned, was that he always spoke about this compounding effect. Yeah. And instead of doing one thing very, very quickly and rushing it, is the power of, he spoke about 5 years, and after 5 years, my biggest takeaway is effectively stick at something for a long time. Not only does that have that compounding effect, you then have the people back your personality, you gain a reputation, and people work out who you really are. I
like that. So we want to summarize it to compound consistency.
Compound consistency sounds good. Let's just put them both together. Okay. I love what he said in his "What Can I Do Differently," when he spoke about the fact that he thinks he's sent 25,000 emails, and in reality 75 of those emails are the main drivers. So it's working out. He said firing a million blanks is not necessarily a bad idea, but working out what your key drivers are is the most important thing in going and doing something yourself, or in any business, I guess. And it's about this principle that they talk about, Pareto principle, which is 20% drives the 80%. So 20% of the inputs drives 80% of the outputs. And I love that theory.
And I think there was one bit he said, and the exact quote, I'll probably get wrong, but something about distilling what you're doing and then using that to shift the dial on the kind of the output. And I think what he did was, yes, he might have fired all his blanks and only some of them were the driving forces. But if he narrows it down to what's the most important and what can bring value to what he's trying to do, that's a really important skill to have that kind of awareness. And it doesn't come immediately. He said he's failed many times and he fired all of those blanks, but through the experience of doing it, he's now learned, where can I focus my energy and what's going to be the best to promote my charity forward.
I think to combine them, it's basically saying learning what moves the dial and focusing in on that. And through learning, because I actually like what you said about the learning part as well. I think learning's key.
You want to try to summarize that?
Okay, here we go. So in conclusion, we've got those 3 learnings. First one being conviction as his currency. The second one being compounding consistency. And the third being learning what moves the dial.
Beautifully summed up. And plenty of good messages from there. I think hopefully people have listened to that one quite closely, because a lot of what he says, he's doing some awesome stuff. And then behind it and what he's doing is actually incredible.
Spot on. I guess that leaves me to do the plugging. So follow us on all relevant social medias and stick around for the next episode.
Beautifully done. See you later.